Hey, it's Kley. Welcome to another video. Today, we're going to build a Dumble. Dude, did you say you're going to build a Dumble? Are you going to build a Dumble? I can't believe you're going to build a Dumble.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Dude, you are going to love that Dumble. Dumbles are so the best amplifiers. No way you two amps worth $150,000. Look at the list of players like that thing up at your own before gig. To John Mayer, Steve Jam, Larry Carlton. Guys! Well, guys, you heard it here first. We're building a Dumble. Dumble amplifiers are probably some of the most notorious in all of guitar world. Insert whatever adjective you want, whether they're the most magical, heralded, most beautiful tone you've ever heard, or whether they're the most overpriced and overexpensive, overhyped, misunderstood amps in the world, or somewhere in between. Part of my adventure here today is to actually build one, see if I can study the circuits and put one together and see how it sounds. The second objective that I have is I want to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit. In my experience with a lot of guitar gear, there is a lot of mythology that builds up, and I think with that, the Dumble amplifiers or the Klon pedals are probably the two foremost examples of that mythology, where there is so much understanding and misunderstanding that gets built up around these. And part of it with Dumbles is because they're so unobtainable. Even the clones are usually $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. And so to find one that you can actually play for a while is really difficult. And so, you know, with a DIY build, I'm more able to get something that's more accessible to me. And also, I hope that I can provide some insight into the circuit and how it ticks. I think Dumble amplifiers are very misunderstood. So let's see if we can analyze them and understand them. And I anticipate that I'll have a similar experience that I had with the fuzz face, where you pull the curtain back and you see that there are parts of that mythology that are snake oil or misunderstandings, or there really isn't any substance there. But then you'll also probably find there are parts of it that are substantiated, and there is a scientific reasoning and explanation for why this type of amp produces such a great tone. And so I'm really excited to actually try to gain an understanding of what the circuit is doing, to build one, and to see how it sounds. So if you're interested in that, stick around, and I hope you enjoy this video. Alright, so what I want to do now is take a look at a schematic. Now, I tread into this a little bit softly, because with Dumble amplifiers, there is a lot of variation, meaning almost every amp that Howard Dumble built, there was a customization process to the customer. Everyone was different. And so there are a lot of minutia that you can get into. If you want to study these circuits, it's almost infinite. But I want to do a kind of bird's eye view, and I'm going to try to explain it like I'm 5. So for those of you that look at schematics and get bored or lost or disinterested, try to stay with me. I want to highlight what I believe are some of the most important or kind of noticeable features about a Dumble amplifier ODS circuit. And I'm going to start with the general features, and then I'm going to go through what I plan to build. I'm going to kind of tweak this to my own taste and preference and what the materials that I've got on hand are. And then hopefully we can get a little better understanding. I'm not going to go through every Dumble ODS schematic known to man. I'm just going to start with the highlights. So I like to look at amplifiers back to front, meaning we start with the power supply. The power supply is located in this area right here. The biggest thing to note is you've got diode rectification, and then you've got a very stiff power supply. So with the diodes, as opposed to a tube rectifier, you're going to have a very fast and firm and tight feeling. There's not going to be a lot of looseness or a lot of sag. And that really contributes to the pick response dynamics, the immediacy, the revealing nature, I believe. And then you see 330 microfarad, 330 microfarad in series. I believe that halves it. So but you're still dealing with about 115 microfarads of capacitance at this first node. So, and then even after that, we've got 4747, which is about 25, but a tremendous amount of stiffness in the power supply due to high filter capacitor values. You know, to contrast, a Tweed Deluxe is going to use a tube rectifier, and it's going to use a 16 microfarad filter cap. That is going to lead to that very loose and spongy and saggy feel. So in my opinion, the way the power supply is configured, very much contributing to a firm, stiff, responsive feel. After that, just a quick note about the transformers. This one lists some Pacific and Magic parts. I also know, I think Howard did use some Fender stuff. Just know that these are beefy transformers. Everything here is overrated and over-spec. You know, we're talking about like twin reverb type transformers. Just very beefy, very robust. Again, to provide that very firm, spongy, or the opposite of spongy, firm, quick, fast, responsive feel. Then I want to move here to the output section. The output section is not terribly remarkable, simply because there really isn't a lot that you can do with an output section. This one has 4 EL34s. I've also seen him use 6L6s. They're always typically in a fixed bias, so it means you've got negative bias coming in right here, which is going to travel into the grids. That's going to bias the tube, and then the cathodes come out here through these 1 ohm resistors, which help you measure the current flow through the tube easier and go straight to ground. There is no cathode bias resistor. Again, I think this is going to help towards that same objective with the power supply. You have a huge headroom, huge power output, tremendous potential for clean, firm, fast, and responsive power section, output section. Very much contributing to that same type of feel. What you see in the power supply, the thematics there are matching in the output section. One interesting little note on this schematic, you've got a bias resistor here. This is where your B plus is going to come in to feed the phase inverters. This bias pod actually would help you to get in with an oscilloscope, and you could balance the phase inverter to a very precise level with this potentiometer. Typically, with a typical guitar amp phase inverter, there is just a level of, I'm going to say, inaccuracy that is just kind of a given. You know, you've got these two signals that are, you know, they come in as one and then they're split. The top one peaks up and then down, the bottom one peaks down and then up. And the magnitude of these two really affects when they come back together right here in the output transformer. If one of these is like a dB or 2 louder, it really means they're going to be unequally yoked, to use kind of a horse-drawn carriage analogy there. And by using this potentiometer, Howard Alexander Dumble could really dial in the phase inverter to a pretty precise level if he so chose. So I know he has a bit of a reputation for kind of a meticulous, detail-oriented nature, and this is just a little detail, I think, towards that end. We see a typical presence, typical long tail pair phase inverter. You've seen this in many guitar amps, so nothing really particularly unique here. Then as we move up to the preamp as a whole, I'm actually going to go back to the input now. It did have a FET input, which is kind of interesting. It ran into a solid state FET, a field something transistor, and that was typically, I think, used to help boost up weak guitar pickups, like from an acoustic guitar or a lap steel. Not maybe the most or best used on electric guitar, which go into the normal channel. Normal channel, very typical. Everything you're seeing right in here, this is very standard. Now, there is some variation in the plate resistor and the cathode bias resistor across the different ODSs. But overall, this is very bog standard for pretty much any guitar amp. You run into a 12AX7 triout and your signal gets amplified. From there, we run into this middle section right here. Now we're coming off of the plate into a tone stack, which is very much like a Fender blackface. And we've got a treble control, a mid control, and a bass control. So we do have kind of a variation on the typical Fender Marshall Vox style tone stack. But this is a little unique, and I would say a little bit more complex and sophisticated. This is an evolution of the Fender blackface tone stack. You have things like, first of all, the bass control and the mid control are actually split apart from one another. The bass signal's coming this way, the middle signal's going this way. Typically, you would see exiting the bass control is when they would go into the mid control. So they're separated, which gives them a little bit more independence from one another and changes how they both kind of function. But then after that, we do see a lot of variation with things like a mid boost, which changes the ability for the treble capacitor, a rock and jazz switch. The rock and jazz switch is a kind of a complex way of going in rock mode. It really is this typical Fender style tone stack. In jazz mode, it actually changes the configuration to be more of a James tone stack, which is a very different shaping EQ. So it's definitely going to come across a little more dull, maybe a little more hi-fi is how I would look at it. You've got a PAB, which is preamp boost, which defeats the ground connection of the tone stack. So you basically bypass all this complex circuitry. I've also seen some other switches in here, like a deep switch. And there's just a, like I said, it's an evolution or an increase in complexity on a Fender tone stack. Then we've got a preamp volume control. This is your first volume. Just like you'd see in a blackface Fender, is same location. Does have an optional bright switch. Then we do see some interesting stuff here at this second gain stage. Again, very blackface Fender to go gain stage, tone stack, volume, gain stage. Now, you see some interesting things here. We've got this 500 picofarad capacitor here, which is going to help boost some treble frequencies. I've also seen at times right in this place be a local negative feedback loop. And actually, I think on this other schematic, yep, right here, you can see this is that same spot coming into the grid, so it gets amplified to the plate, and it actually is allowed to sense high frequencies, and then there's 2244 mega ohms of total resistance. So, so a local negative feedback loop here, and that's going to kind of, again, create some more of that hi-fi type sound and feel. So Dumble is doing a lot of things here to evolve the EQ of the preamp. So from this stage, it goes into a switch. We'll come back to the switching later, but the switching either would send the signal to a master volume and to a passive effects loop, and then to the phase inverter. What I just described is basically a Fender Blackface AB763 that has been evolved and made more complex in this tone shaping circuit. But other than that, gain stage, tone stack, volume, gain stage, long tail pair phase inverter, that is the basic recipe for a blackface Fender. So this amp is definitely in that ballpark on the clean channel. The drive channel interrupts that connection and instead sends the signal here. So basically when you add the drive channel, you have two gain stages right here and here that are added after and run in series with the clean channel. So everything you do in the clean channel still gets affected by the drive channel. So this volume control becomes kind of a pre-gain. All these EQ controls really change the tone and feel of the drive channel. But this is an interesting idea. You know, there are a lot of the other high gain amps like the JCM 800 or the Mesa Boogie stuff was instead adding gain stages into the front of the amp. So it's interesting that Dumble chose to add it to the end of the preamp. And then really this is about boosting the amount of distortion, but in a controlled manner. Dumble Overdrive is not wild or out of control. It's very refined and tasteful, and I think a lot of that is just the way that these triodes are handled. You've got a trim control here, a resistor here, a resistor here. So even the signal coming from the clean channel is some of it's being sent to ground, and it's being resisted. So it's kind of pumping the brakes a little bit on what's going on. We've got a gain stage here, right here. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is not true on every single one, but you see this capacitor, so the signal comes into the grid, out the plate, and then right here, it can continue on, and this value of cap is kind of modest, meaning it's going to trim some bass frequencies. Not all the bass is going to let through, but right here you've got this snubbing resistor, 25 picofarad, and this is basically giving a path to ground. So you're allowing the very, very high frequencies, kind of the fizzy frequencies, especially when we're adding all this distortion. The fizzy frequencies are being bled to ground. So it's really, you're cutting treble here, you're cutting bass here. So it's a very mid-focused drive. More resistance, another drive control. Now, sometimes on the Dumble, this is labeled as level, I believe. It's the first control of these two, this one. I think sometimes it's called level. That is basically, you know, if this is your pre-gain, this kind of becomes gain number 2, and in practice, it really sets the amount of level of distortion when you engage the drive channel. But really, it's just a volume control in this location of the circuit. And then same thing here. Go through this gain stage, amplified. Got this snubbing resistor to bleed the very high treble frequencies to ground. You got this, an even lower value cap. And so that's going to trim even more bass. So again, trimming high trebles, trimming bass, very mid-focused. And then you go into this OD volume, or what sometimes is labeled as the ratio control. And ratio is a little bit misconstruing. I would think of it more as like a pre-master just for the drive channel. You still have your master, but this is kind of like, it's intended to set the ratio, so when you go from the clean channel to the drive channel, use this control to make the volume what you want. If you want them to be about the same volume, you can do that. Or if you want the volume to increase, you can do that. So you're kind of setting the quote-unquote ratio going from clean to drive. So overall, though, that is a bird's eye look at the schematic. There's a lot of room for variation. The number of power tubes, you can go 2 to 4, 606, EL34. A lot of complexity in these preamp stages, a lot of variation in a lot of these resistors and capacitor values. I've even seen an HRM, hot rodded Marshall, hot rubber monkey, who knows, but that refers to if you would add right here on the end of the drive channel, if you were to add another tone stack, a treble mid-bass tone stack, that's what that means. And the primary purpose for that is because you have your tone control so early in the circuit, it's nice to have tone controls again at the end to shape specifically the drive signal. Because sometimes you want to set your EQ on the clean channel differently than you want to set on the drive, right? If you want to set for a clean, spanky Fender mid-scoop thing in the clean, but then you want to go, maybe you want your drive to be the opposite, where it's very mid-pushed, you can do that with the HRM mod a little bit better. I'm going to quit yapping. It's probably too long already, but that is kind of an overview of an ODS style circuit. For my build, I am going to be using this schematic. This is a brown note delight. It's a kit style ODS that was offered several years ago, and I'm going to tweak it somewhat heavily, but this is my starting point at least. It's, I think, a good basis. It has a lot of what I would like to put in, and it's kind of going to be the baseline for my build. I am also going to do some significant variation, though. I'm going to use 2 EL84s instead of 34s or 6L6s. So it is going to be a lower wattage amp, less available clean headroom. But I have, my 50-watt amps are way too loud and powerful anyways. So this will be a little more usable for my context. And I'm also going to change the preamp to get some of the different circuit switching that I want. Then the last note I want to make is, in this area, is the switching. So you'll notice, like right here we've got switching, here we've got switching. The Dumble ODS would use relays for switching. That means Dumble would actually use a different transformer that would come like off the primary, and it had its own voltage source, and then it was rectified, filtered, and then regulated, and then that would supply the relays. And relays are nice because it allows you to do foot switching, so you can do foot switching as complex as you want. And it also is nice because it helps because it's a little more high gain circuit, especially on the drive channel. You don't have to be routing the signal in ways that it would be suboptimal for lead dress or keeping noise down. You can use the switching to make that more efficient or work better. So I'm going to use relay switching just for the clean and drive channel. Everything else I'm going to leave with switching on the front panel with a little toggle switch. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please stay tuned. I will have some follow-up videos with the actual physical build of this amp, and then obviously many tone tests. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe and check it out. Also, if you're interested, check the links in the description. I have some merchandise if you want to buy a t-shirt or a coffee mug to help support my channel, to help me build amplifiers like this and teach you guys more about this. Please consider checking that out. I also have a Patreon, which you can support me there as well. So please check out those links if you feel inclined to support me. It would be very much appreciated. That would boost my ability to provide more content like this. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm very excited to build this amp. Let's go ahead and get started. See you soon. Bye.